A new civil war began in Sudan on April 15th, 2023. It involves two large groups from the military. These groups are fighting each other for power in the country. The first group is called the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF. It is led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The second group is the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, led by Hemedti. The war has caused serious harm to Sudan. Many people have died, and others have had to leave their homes. Cities, towns, and farms have been heavily damaged. Fighting started in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Both groups wanted to control key places like airports and government buildings. The violence quickly spread to other parts of the country. People living in these areas also suffered from attacks, food shortages, and lack of safety. Over 7.7 million people were forced to move within Sudan. Around 2 million left the country to escape the war, becoming refugees in other nations. Both sides use weapons like airstrikes, tanks, and guns, causing great destruction. Civilians or normal people often become victims during battles. Groups that tried to stop the war failed to make peace. A big meeting in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, aimed to stop the violence but did not succeed. Today, Sudan remains in a bad state. Homes, schools, and hospitals are destroyed. The fighting shows no signs of stopping soon. Sudan gained independence from Britain in 1956. Since then, the country has faced many problems, including war and political instability. Sudan has had 19 military coups, more than any other country in Africa. This shows how often its government has been taken over by force. Most of Sudan's history has been controlled by military leaders. There were only short periods of democratic rule when civilians had power. Two major civil wars shaped Sudan's past. The First War started in 1955 and ended in 1972. It caused great suffering and killed many people. The Second Civil War began in 1983 and lasted until 2005. This war was even worse, killing over 1.5 million people and forcing many to leave their homes. These wars were between the central government and people in the South. The South wanted freedom, and in 2011, South Sudan became a separate country. Another big conflict happened in Darfur, a region in western Sudan. It started in 2003 and was caused by fights over land and resources. This conflict led to terrible violence and death. Over 200,000 people died, and about 2 million had to leave their homes to stay safe. The government used groups like the Janjaweed to attack Darfur's people. These groups were later reorganized into the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Sudan's history has been filled with struggles for power and land. These events have made the country's situation more unstable over time. The conflicts left many people poor and without hope. They also created deep divisions between different groups in the country. This background helps explain why Sudan is still facing problems today. The new civil war is part of a long history of violence and political fights. The Sudanese Civil War started because of a power struggle between two leaders. These leaders were part of Sudan's military government. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan leads the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF. Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, or Hemedti, leads the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Both men wanted to control Sudan. They disagreed on how to share power and how to run the country. This caused tensions to grow. After the revolution in 2019, Sudan's leaders promised to share power. The plan included both military and civilian leaders working together. However, this agreement did not last. In 2021, the military, including al-Burhan and Hemedti, took control in a coup. The coup stopped Sudan's move toward democracy. Many people were angry, and protests began. The military leaders became more divided. Another key issue was the RSF's role in Sudan's army. The government wanted to merge the RSF with the National Army to make one unified force. Hemeti, the RSF leader, wanted the process to take 10 years. Al-Burhan, the army leader, wanted it done in 2 years. This disagreement led to conflict. Both leaders saw each other as threats to their power and acted to protect their positions. Economic problems also made things worse. Sudan's people were already struggling with poverty, and trust in the government was low. Hemedti controlled gold mines, giving him wealth and power. This made al-Burhan and his allies see Hemedti as a bigger threat. Together, these issues, power struggles, economic problems, and lack of trust, led Sudan into a new and deadly civil war. The war began on April 15, 2023, with sudden attacks by the RSF. These attacks targeted key military bases and government buildings. Fighting started in Khartoum, Sudan's capital city. The RSF tried to take control of airports, bridges, and important areas of the city. The SAF responded with airstrikes and ground attacks. Heavy weapons were used, causing destruction across the city and nearby areas. The RSF blocked roads and took control of parts of Khartoum. Civilians were caught in the middle, facing danger and shortages of supplies. Many people were trapped in their homes as the fighting spread. They had little access to food, water, and medicine during the chaos. The violence quickly spread to other cities, including Omdurman and Bahri. These cities, along with Khartoum, became major battle zones. The RSF captured many government buildings in Khartoum. Al-Burhan and the SAF had to move their base to Port Sudan for safety. Both sides ignored calls for peace. International leaders asked for a ceasefire, but the fighting continued without pause. The first days of the war left thousands dead or injured. Roads, homes, and hospitals were damaged, making life harder for civilians. Many countries tried to help stop the war. They also sent aid to support the people suffering in Sudan. Aid organizations faced challenges as roads and airports were unsafe. This made it hard to bring help to those in need. By the end of April 2023, the war showed no signs of ending. Both the SAF and RSF prepared for a long conflict. The Sudanese civil war involves two main groups: the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The SAF is the National Army of Sudan. It is led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who has been in power since 2021. The RSF is a paramilitary group that started as the Janjaweed militia in Darfur. It is led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also called Hemedti. The SAF has the support of former rebel groups that joined the government after peace deals. These groups want to keep their power. Rebel groups like the Justice and Equality Movement, GM, and the Sudan Liberation Movement, SLM, are now allied with the SAF. On the other hand, the RSF has the support of some tribes and armed groups, especially in Darfur and border areas. Outside Sudan, other countries have become involved by giving weapons or political support to either the SAF or RSF. Egypt has supported the SAF with intelligence and military aid. It sees Sudan as an important neighbor and ally. The RSF has received help from the UAE and other nations. They are accused of giving weapons and money to Hemedti's forces. Rebel groups that used to fight the government have also taken sides. Some support the SAF, while others joined the RSF. For example, the SPLM North, led by Abdelaziz al-Hilu, is fighting the SAF in southern Sudan. It has its own goals. These alliances make the war more complex, with many groups and nations involved for their own reasons. The war has been devastating for Sudanese civilians. Millions of people have been affected, with many losing their homes and loved ones. Over 7.7 million people have been displaced inside Sudan, while more than 2 million have fled to other countries as refugees. Cities like Khartoum, Omdurman, and Darfur have suffered the most. Homes, schools, and hospitals in these areas have been destroyed. Food shortages are a major problem. Farms and markets have been damaged by the fighting, leaving many people without enough to eat. The United Nations has warned that millions of people in Sudan face hunger. Some areas, like North Darfur, are already experiencing famine. Healthcare is also in crisis. Many hospitals have closed, and medicine is hard to find. People cannot get proper treatment when they are sick. In Darfur, ethnic violence has made the situation worse. Groups like the RSF and militias have attacked certain communities. These attacks include killings, kidnappings, and the destruction of villages. Many people in Darfur now live in constant fear. Women and children are especially vulnerable. There have been reports of sexual violence, which adds to the suffering of families. Refugee camps in neighboring countries like Chad and Egypt are overcrowded. People there struggle to find food, water, and shelter. Aid organizations are trying to help, but the war makes it hard for them to reach those in need. Roads and airports are often unsafe. Civilians face daily challenges like hunger, fear, and lack of safety. The war has made life in Sudan extremely hard for everyone. Many countries and international groups have tried to help Sudan end the war. They want both sides to agree to a ceasefire. The United Nations and African Union have held talks with leaders of the SAF and RSF. However, these meetings have not brought peace. A treaty called the Jeddah Agreement was signed in May 2023. It aimed to protect civilians and allow aid workers to do their jobs. The Jeddah Agreement failed because both sides broke their promises. Fighting continued, and aid workers faced many dangers. Humanitarian organizations, like the Red Cross and World Food Program, have tried to send supplies to those in need. These efforts are often blocked by the fighting. Roads and airports are unsafe, making it difficult to deliver food, medicine, and other aid. As of 2024, the war in Sudan is still ongoing. Both the SAF and RSF continue to fight for control of key areas in the country. The SAF has made some gains in cities like Omdurman and Khartoum North, while the RSF controls much of Darfur and parts of central Sudan. The fighting has caused great destruction to homes, schools, and businesses. Many areas now lack basic services like electricity and clean water. Peace talks have not led to a lasting solution. Both sides blame each other for the failure of agreements to stop the fighting. Millions of people in Sudan are suffering. Hunger, disease, and homelessness are some of the biggest problems they face every day. The country's economy is in ruins. Farms and factories have stopped working, and international trade has almost completely collapsed. Experts worry the war could last for years if no strong action is taken to stop it. The longer it lasts, the more people will suffer. Sudan will need years of rebuilding once the war ends. Homes, schools, and hospitals must be repaired, and people need help to recover. International support will be important for Sudan's future. Countries and aid groups must work together to help rebuild the nation. Despite the challenges, there is hope that Sudan can find peace. The people of Sudan want safety, stability, and a better future. Leaders and organizations must work harder to stop the violence. A peaceful Sudan can only be built through unity and trust. The end of this war would give millions of people a chance to rebuild their lives and make Sudan a better place for all.